Okay, so you obviously have made it through the main sew along videos, or you've jumped ahead because you're interested in making a cute little cropped Kingston jacket. So I'm going to walk you through making a cropped Kingston that instead of falling right at your hip bone, where the original jacket falls, it'll fall higher up at your natural waistline. So let me fold up my jacket to kind of give you a visual of what the crop would look like. So it'll go up really high, it'll be cute and cropped at your natural waist, so you can pair it easily with skirts, dresses, for a cute little cropped jacket look. So watch the next video segment, as this is focused completely on the crop hack, and I think you'll really love it. Okay, so we are starting the hack video for the Kingston jacket if you want to make a crop top version of the Kingston. So what you will need for this to get started is a flexible measuring tape, because we need to take a couple of measurements. So the first thing that we need to do is measure from the shoulder seam, or right where it hits on our shoulder, down to where we want the end of the jacket to fall. So this is going to be a little bit different for everyone, this number, and that's why we need to take the measurement appropriately. If you're wearing just a regular top, you probably have a shoulder seam. On the shirt that I'm wearing, I've got a shoulder seam that's right at the tip of my shoulder. So if you have a shoulder seam like that on the top that you're wearing right now, you can find that, and that's a pretty accurate representation of where you want to measure from. If you're wearing, a drop shoulder top or something else right now, then that's not going to be a helpful rule of thumb to use. So instead, you might want to just kind of feel around on your shoulder. And I have a pretty bony shoulder, got like a big bump that kind of sticks out. I don't know if anybody else does. I might just be a little bit weird. But that shoulder bump is also like dead center on my shoulder. So if you have a shoulder bump like I do, you can measure from there. If you don't have any of these defining features, that's quite all right. You could just find the spot where you believe your shoulder seam will fall on the jacket. Anyway, so line the edge of your measuring tape up with your shoulder, and then let your soft measuring tape fall. So if you want to have your jacket fall at the natural waist, that's a really awesome spot to have a crop top, or to have a crop jacket in this case. So you might want to measure to just like the top of your natural waist. So mine actually happens to be right where my skirt waistband is, because of how high-waisted this skirt is that I'm wearing. So I can take the measurement right there. So I'm just gonna hold it with my finger. So that comes in right about like 16.5 inches from the shoulder to the waist. So grab a piece of paper and write that down so you don't forget what that measurement is. And now we're gonna jump in and do some more measurements. We'll have to tweak our pattern pieces just a bit to shorten everything and to accommodate for the yoke and to accommodate for the waistband. But don't worry, it's pretty easy. I think you'll be really surprised by just how easy it is. So let's go do that now. We're going to get started with the Kingston crop hack, part of this sew along. And to get started, you will need to grab a couple of materials. So if you have a straight flat ruler, grab that. Tape, paper scissors, pencil. It can be colored, it can be plain. The only thing I could find right now was this colored pencil, so that's what I grabbed. A pen, and maybe some scrap pieces of paper. If you have a couple lying around, this will help you out. And then you'll also obviously need some of the pattern pieces. So you will need quite a few of the pattern pieces. So I want to highlight which ones specifically for you, which ones you'll need for this hack. So we need the back, we need the back side, we need the front middle, the front right, the front left, front side, and then all three of the yoke pieces. So the back yoke, the front, the right front, and the left front yoke. We will be actually creating new pattern pieces for the waistbands. Because of where the crop is going to fall on your body, the original waistbands that we have that come with the pattern are not going to be sufficient. They will need to be altered because they'll be too wide. So I'm going to be talking to you about how to draft the new waistband pieces. When I say drafting, I know some of you are probably cringing a little bit, but it's really easy. It's really easy drafting. We're talking some rectangles sketched out on a piece of paper. So you guys are totally capable of doing that. We're gonna do this together. It's gonna be great, and you'll have a really cute cropped jacket. So let's jump in and get started. On my scratch piece of paper, I am going to start out by just recording the measurement that we just took in the last video. So that was 16.5 for me. That was my shoulder to crop hem measurement. So yours may not be 16 and a half. That's okay. It doesn't have to be. All of our bodies are different, and that's what makes us beautiful. So just grab your number from that last video of measuring and write it down on a piece of paper. Now, what we're going to need to do is do a little bit of measurements. You may have to do a little bit of math, but it's not going to be too hard. And something I should have noted at the beginning of this video is that you will be cutting apart the front and back pattern pieces. You won't be actually cutting apart the yoke. So if you want to go ahead and print out another copy of your front side, front left, right front, front middle, back side, and back jacket pieces, so like all the main body pieces for your jacket, if you want to go ahead and print that out, print out another copy, you can. Or, you know, if you have tracing paper, you can trace these out of the original pattern pieces. Or if you're okay with cutting apart your original Kingston pattern pieces, go ahead and cut them apart. But you should know we will be cutting these pieces apart. So if you're not okay with cutting your original pieces, then you'll want to go and print these out. Print out new copies or trace them for yourself. Okay, so let's get into the measurement work here. So because 16 and a half is our desired length for the jacket from shoulder to hem, we want it to be 16 and a half inches, or, you know, whatever your body measurement is. That's your magic number here. What we're going to need to do is calculate and measure the yokes, and then from there, once we've determined what the yoke measurements are, then we will also need to accommodate for a waistband measurement that's a certain width, for adding that. And then finally, once we've done that, we can actually alter the main pattern pieces and know exactly how long we need to leave these pieces. So there is a little bit of math involved, but you guys are gonna be fine. Okay, so first things first, I think it's easiest to separate out the pattern pieces based on the front and back. So let's put front pile, back pile here. So we've got front. Start the front pile here. We're gonna start the back pile over here. So this is a front piece. This is a front. This is a front. This is a front. This is a back and another back piece. Okay. That'll just make it a little easier having them kind of sorted out for when we have to do things, because we're going to probably have to do slightly different alterations to the pattern pieces for the front and the back, just based on the difference in the yoke lengths. Okay, so speaking of the yokes, grab your front yokes first. So both of these pattern pieces are the exact same width, which is great. So you can grab either one. They're interchangeable, you know, left or right. Just grab one of them for now. And grab your ruler. what we need to do is measure from the uppermost point of the shoulder seam, just zoom in here a little bit, down, straight down into the jacket yoke here, the front yoke. So we want to get this measurement, and it's coming in right at 6 5/8 about. Let's see, or hold on, let me see if I read this right. I'm sorry, not 5/8, 3/4. Okay, so we need to start on our sheet of paper, our little scratch paper. We need to start a little note for ourselves. So I'm gonna do, just because I think it's easiest, to do like a front column and a back column. So our front yoke lengths here, and I'm just gonna put yoke. Wow, I just forgot that measurement. Sorry. Yeah, so that was 6 3/4. Okay, so 6.75 inches. Okay, that's fine. Now, what we need to do, we can set the yoke apart to the side. Let's grab the back yoke and let's measure it. So to measure it, we're gonna do the same thing from the widest part of the yoke pattern piece. We're gonna go down, measure that. So that piece from shoulder to bottom is 7.5 inches long. So let's put yoke 7.5 on our scratch piece of paper, okay? And we'll set that piece aside. Now, I know I said you don't need the waistband, but you do need it for just a second. So grab the back waistband piece, because this is going to tell us what the width of the original waistband is. I want to just base it off of the original width of the waistband, because the waistband is a really nice feature. So let's just, from the center point to the center point where the notches are, let's just see in a straight line what that measurement comes out to, and it's 3.25 inches. Okay, so on my scratch paper, I'm gonna make a note somewhere else. The waistband width is 3.25. Okay, and now I don't need the waistband pieces anymore. I can put that away if I want to. Okay, so in all of this, all of these measurements we've just taken, we've measured the pattern pieces with the 5/8 inch seam allowance included. That's fine. We can go ahead and just continue on with knowing that the seam allowance is included. So in these pattern pieces, that's fine. This, however, our original shoulder to crop hem measurement, this is assuming that all the seam allowances are included as well. So that's assuming that, we've finished all the seams. We want, after everything has been finished, to hit at 16.5 inches. So with that being the case, we need our pattern pieces to be 16.5 inches, but that's included with the yoke and the waistband width. So what we need to do next is add the yoke, the front and back yokes, to the waistband width. All of this has the seam allowances included, that's fine. And know that this total minus this is going to be what the remainder of our pattern pieces should be. And that's what we're gonna need to take off of the original pattern. So let's do the math here. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna add the waist measurement to my front and back. So that's 3.25, 3.25, and we're gonna total these up. So, okay, so they're really only different by 3/4 inch on the back and front. So my measurements came up with, I should have 10. Your measurements are gonna be a little bit different based on the size that you are sewing. So I am currently sewing the small size pattern. So you guys should know that. All my pattern pieces are based off of the small, but if you are sewing a different size in this jacket, your measurements are going to be different than me. The only way that you really don't have to do the math is if You want the crop to hit the same exact place as me, 16.5 inches down from my shoulder. And you're using the small pattern pieces, but if you're doing anything different, you have to do this math with me. So it's okay, you can do this. Okay, so the difference now for the front, okay, so this is what we're keeping, and I'm just gonna make a note. We're keeping 10 inches. We're keeping 10 3/4 inches for the front and back. So that means anything, the difference between these two, we have to do that math, but anything that goes over that measurement and the difference is something we're going to have to get rid of. All right, so if you need a calculator, bust out your calculator. My front seam, so I'm just gonna make a note, difference in measurements, the front 6.5 inches, and the difference in measurements for the back. You can run this through your calculator. You don't have to do this math in your head. I'm going to do mine in my calculator just to make sure I'm double checking, make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, so difference in measurements back is 5.75 inches. Okay, so these are the magic numbers. Magic numbers are circled right here and here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit further too so you can see this page really well. So magic number 6.5. Magic number for the back 5 3/4. So our pattern pieces for the bodice and for all those side panels and everything that we have, they can't be any longer than these two magic number measurements. Or we're gonna end up with some jacket that's longer than our desired jacket length, okay? So just a refresher, this number at the top of my page is my desired jacket length with the crop. I then took my yoke front measurement, my back yoke measurement, the waistband width, we're using the original waistband width, so that was 3 1/4 and 3 1/4. We added those two measurements together because those are the pattern pieces we're keeping, and then we subtracted what we're keeping from the original desired length, and that's how we got the magic measurement here and here for the front and back, okay? So hopefully that was an easy process for you. Like I said before, this is for the small size jacket. If you have anything other than the small, you are going to want to do that whole process yourself with your pattern pieces and your own measurement and everything that you want. You can totally do it. So next we're going to be altering the pattern pieces. All right, so with your magic numbers and your little scrap piece of paper nearby and handy, we're now going to start altering the pattern pieces. It sounds scary, but I promise it's not. You guys have got this. Okay, so what we need to do is grab the pile of the back pattern pieces. We're gonna start with those first. You could start with the front if you want to, but I'm starting with the back. So let's just set those aside for now. I've got the back side pattern piece right here. So what you'll see is the length and shorten line. That is a really crucial, critical line because that's what we're going to cut apart to shorten our pattern piece with. But first, let's measure from the longest point here, where we have 5 3/4 inches that we're working with here for the back side. All right, so that in mind, we don't have a lot to work with. 5 3/4 inches, let's just mark that out, draw a little line all the way across. And it will angle down a little bit because the one side is bigger than the other. So draw that line. I'm using this blue pencil, okay? So, just gonna double check that we've got what we want here. Yes. Okay, now what we need to do is cut along that line. The blue line we just created. The rest of this pattern piece, just set it aside. You might want to make a note that that's the back side pattern piece, just in case you do ever need to reassemble these pattern pieces. You know, you might also want to say like cut to fabric, you know, that sort of thing. But just alter the first pattern piece. And I know it's so short, right? Like so short, but that's okay because think about what we're doing here. They're gonna get connected to the yoke, you know, all the way across. So when all is said and done, it's really like this long right now. And then you're gonna have a waistband as well. So it seems really short when you cut the pattern apart, but I promise you, it's actually not as short as it looks right now and as scary as it feels right now to cut that much off of a pattern. So don't panic, you're doing the right thing. Let's see, yeah, and then we're gonna have, you know, 3 1/4 here, like inches. So, you know, when all is said and done, gonna come in around our 16 1/2. Okay. All right, so good job. You've just done the back side. We're not touching the back yoke, so that one's done too. So we can just set that aside too. Now, pull up your jacket back piece. And now we need to get rid of everything except the 5.75 inches. So do the same thing from the center points. That'll be your easiest way to find where to cut. And just start drawing a line. I've switched to pen because for right now, marking these little things, it's just way more precise than the pencil I'm using, which is very dull. But don't mind me. Now, connect that line. You can use your pencil now. I'm gonna use mine. Whoop. As long as it stays accurate. Okay, this blue line, I'm not sure if you can see it. So I'm gonna zoom in just a second. You see it better. My blue line is where I'm going to cut, and that's all I'm going to keep. And on the bottom of this, I'm going to just write that this is the back and it's a fabric. Okay, set that aside. Yay, we have a back now. Okay, so now we can move on to altering the front pattern pieces. So we're not doing anything with the yokes. I've said that for the back. Same thing applies for the fronts. We are going to do the front middle piece. Now switching to the other magic measurement that you have on your little handy paper, that's 6 1/2 inches. Okay, so just make sure when you draw your line, it's 6 1/2 inches down this time, not the measurement you were using for the back, because these are different. Okay, so 6 1/2. Okay. Oh, we need to draw that line. It'll make it easier. And you know how when you're usually shortening a pattern, you use the lengthen or shorten here line, but I basically told you guys to look past it and not use it for this. It's because in most pattern alterations, when you're shortening or lengthening something, you want to maintain the waistband seam or the waistline. For this, our waistband seam, our waistline is totally different because we're bringing the jacket up so high. It's gonna hit at a totally different spot on people's waists. So it's really more important here that we chop off the right amount, less important that we keep the original waist seam or hem. All right, I'm just gonna write this down. This was the front middle piece. Move that off. Okay, good job, you've got that one. Now let's go, I'm grabbing my front right piece, and from the top, measure down 6 1/2 inches. Okay, and draw that straight line across. That's going to be our cutting line. Cut across it. And this time I need to write on my top piece to note that it is the front right. And I'm just gonna say top. Fabric And you might also want to just make a note that it's the crop hack. So on the other pattern pieces that you've altered, you might want to go back and just make a note that this is the crop hack. This is just, it's so helpful to leave little notes for yourself, so that if you ever come back and make this jacket again, you know exactly what you did last time. I always write all over my pattern pieces because I just like to know what I did. Okay, so set that side apart. Okay, so we've altered that, put that in the altered pile. Grab your front left pattern piece and measure down the 6.5 inches. Connect that line. And then we're gonna cut that line. And we're gonna make that note that this is the front left now, and this is the crop hack. And we need fabric cut 1. And I'm just gonna say top also, so we don't get these confused. Okay, great, we're going right through this. We're breezing through. We're on the last pattern piece now, and that's the front side. So draw that line, 6.5 inch line. Okay, and that one gets angled a little bit as we go. We're gonna cut across. You know the drill. All right, so now we should have a good pile of pattern pieces and a good pile of back pieces. So you may be wondering what we're gonna do with the waistband. We can do this a couple of different ways. We can either go along the bottoms, measure along the bottom parts of all the pattern pieces, or to see, you know, how long each rectangle for the waistband needs to be. Or we can make a muslin or a toile of this, of all these pattern pieces, measure it, and then figure it out from there. So the method is completely up to you, what you decide. If you're going to sew along with me, I am going to go ahead and make a muslin, and that way I can try it on, see how it goes. The muslin is going to be very basic because we're going to just assemble it. We're not doing flat fell seams or anything. We're just doing the 5/8 inch seam allowance to get a feel for how short the jacket will be. You will want to do the yokes though, and then from there we can measure everything up. So I think that's the way I'm gonna do it with the muslin. It may be a little bit of extra work, but I think it's worth it because you know exactly how long to make your waistband. So how you do this is up to you. Like I said, if you don't wanna make a muslin, I wouldn't advise it. I mean, I would always advise making a muslin just because it's safer. But if you wanna just mathematically go for it, measure across all of these pattern pieces, you can do that and calculate it out. But I'm gonna go make a muslin now, and I'll come back and show you how to measure the waistband and make the waistband for this. Okay, so before you go and make your muslin or measure your pattern pieces, there's one thing I totally forgot to mention when I was shortening the pieces. What we need to actually do is grab the back side and the back pattern pieces and grab the stubby ends that we've cut off. So we need to add a little bit back into the pattern. So I totally forgot when I first told you guys how to go with the measurements and everything, that the jacket has a dropped shoulder seam. So that just means that the main flat fell seam that runs across the shoulder is dropped. And I did not accommodate for that. So in my measurements, so you need to go in and add to the back side and the back pattern pieces an extra 2 inches. So grab that original pattern piece bottom and the original pattern piece top and tape them back together. This is why we held on to them. And what we need to do now is just add an extra 2 inches into the seam allowance, or sorry, into the lengthening. And what you could do is just simply cut along the lengthen shorten line on your pattern, because that's, for me, that's the right length. So I'm actually gonna just cut along the lengthen shorten line and use this amount of length for the back piece, for the crop back piece. And then for the back side, go ahead and tape those pattern pieces back together. Sorry if you cut them. I just remembered it before I made my muslin. Sometimes it just happens like that. Okay, we want to add 2 inches back in. Ooh, that tape job was bad. Let me just... If you don't add these 2 inches in and you make a muslin, you will see that the jacket comes up short in the back. So we don't want that, do we? All right, so the extra 2 inches in my case is the length and shorten line again. So that might be the same case for you. You might just be able to adjust your pieces by adding to that length and shorten line, or sorry, by cutting them across the length and shorten line. And that's all well and fine. And I hope that's the case for you because it makes it easy. But if it's not, just add the extra 2 inches in. All right, thanks. Now you can go make your muslin, and we'll go and test the waistband length, make the waistband next. Okay, so I have just finished making my muslin of the crop jacket hack here. So all I really did was just assemble everything. I didn't worry about the flat felt seams. I just assembled with 5/8 inch seam allowances and I pressed them open. So all the pieces here have been, put together. And what we need to do now is create the waistband using the finished measurements here of the jacket and then adding the seam allowances back in. So this will allow us to get a really nice fitting waistband. All right, so grab a scratch piece of paper that you can write on and we'll get started. You'll also need to have a flexible measuring tape or flat measuring tape, and then some paper, scissors, some paper, a pen or a pencil, whatever your preferred writing implement is. So first things first, this is the left side as worn waistband. Okay, so left is worn. If you're confused which side is which, just hold it up to yourself or put the jacket on, put this muslin on. And now what we're gonna do is measure from the seam to the opening. Okay, so this is coming in, we're measuring along the waistband. Now mine is coming in right at 11 5/8 is what I've got. Okay, so let's write this down. Left waist measure. Okay, and write that down on your scratch piece of paper. Now, the right side should be the same, but just go ahead and measure it anyway. So we want to make sure we have this right. Yep, it's exactly the same. And the right waistband is the same, 11 5/8. Okay, and then the back is what we need to measure now. All the way to the underarm seam, or the side seam, I should say. That is 16 5/8. Now, we need to add our seam allowances in now because this is the finished jacket. So we've obviously sewn it with 5/8 inch seam allowance, which means that the seams are all in the jacket right now. So we need to add that 5/8 7 inch seam allowance back into each piece. So just on your paper, make a note that says with seam allowance, and we need to add a seam allowance of 5/8 in for every piece that we have. So how many seams do we have in the back pieces, right? So we've got 1, 2. So we have 5/8. Okay, so for every pattern piece, we should have 1.25 inches worth of seam allowance that gets added in. We've got 1.25, 1.25, 1.25. So 1.25 times 3 for the back is roughly 3.75 inches of seam allowance, plus that back waistband measurement that we took. So that's putting us right in at 20.375. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see how I got there, just in case you weren't able to track. So each pattern piece has 1.25, has a seam allowance of 1.25 added to it because you've got 2 seams on either side of the pieces. Multiply that by 3 because there are 3 back pieces. There's one side back, one main back here, and another side back. So that's where the 3 came from. So 3.75 plus the 16.625, which was the waistband measurement. So add that to the seam allowance, and we're getting 20.375. That is how long our back waistband piece needs to be. So I'm just gonna make that very clear. Measures 3.25, that's that width, by 20.375. So that's our measurement. So we've got 3.25 as our width that we used. We calculated that before. And then we've got 20.375, which is what we just measured here with seam allowance. Okay, now we need to do the same thing for the front. So how many front pieces do we have? We have more front pieces. We have 3 front pieces actually. So that same for each front side. We've got 3.75, and then we can add it to the left and we can add it to the right. So we're coming in at 15.375. So front left waist, when you've added the seam allowance plus what we measured, and then the front right. And I know you can't see what I'm writing, but I'm going to show you all of this. Okay. So I added the seam allowance, which is 3.75, plus the 11.625, which was that measurement that I took of the left front, and that gave me 15.375. Then the right side is also the same measurement, so 15.375. So that makes our final measurements for the rectangles we need to draw for the waistband, these. So the back, we're gonna draw a rectangle that's 3¼ inches wide by 20 long, roughly 20.375. For the front left and the front right waistbands, we're gonna do that same width of 3¼ but we're gonna do a shorter length. So let's do that now. Your waistband measurements are probably gonna be different than mine if you're not doing the size small jacket. Quite all right, we've discussed this already. If you followed the math along with me, you should be totally fine. You should be able to do this without a problem. Okay, so this piece of paper is not long enough for my current purposes for the back waistband, but that's okay, I can lengthen it just by adding some paper to it. Grab my tape, grab my paper. If you have tracing paper, that works too. Transfer paper, tracing paper, pattern paper, medical paper. There's so many things for what you can use for pattern paper. Okay, so what we need to do to start is draw a line that's 3¼ wide. So I'm going to use this edge of my paper is not straight. So I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm going to actually start in a little bit. I'm not trying to be wasteful here with paper. I just do not have a straight edge, and that's why I'm starting the way I'm starting. Okay, all right, so this is the width. Okay, now we need to do the length here. So that puts us right at 18, but we need to go to 20. 20 and 3/8 is our measurement here. I'm just gonna pop this in. Okay, and let's connect these lines. It's a whole lot of measuring. So let's mark on this piece that this is for the back waistband and this is the crop hack, and we need to cut 2 mirror image hair and 5/8 inch seam allowance is included. So we can also, if we want to, put a couple of notches and things in this to make it a little bit nice for ourselves. So grab your paper scissors. Let's just cut this band out. Okay, so our fabric grain should be up and down, parallel with the ends. If you want to, you can fold your paper in half and just mark it in that half point to kind of serve as the little notches for your side seams to know where they should get placed. And then if you want to fold the paper in half lengthwise, you can do that. And there is a notch that goes at the top. So you can mark the notch. There you go. So now we have a back waistband. What we're gonna do is repeat that whole process for the front waistbands. And then you guys can actually sew and add the cut out and sew and then add the waistband to your crop hack here, to the muslin, and see how you like it. Try it on, see if it's exactly what you want, if you're happy with the length. That's all for us. Once you've made your back waistband, you are good to go. You can just add it to the bottom and follow the regular waistband instructions. So you're gonna stitch all 3 waistband pieces together at the side seams, attach it at the bottom so it goes all the way across, and then you're gonna do that, repeat that for the lining, and then fold it up and top stitch it just like you would for the regular jacket. So just treat these back waistband pieces exactly the same as you would the original waistband pieces. They're just not curved, that's the only difference. So have a wonderful time, and if you do end up making the cropped jacket Kingston hack, please let us know in the Facebook groups or on social media. I'd love to see what you've made and if this video has been helpful for you. Thanks.